Okay. Interesting week, right? We've kind of had an interesting week. I don't know how many of you guys pay attention to the news, but there's quite a few massive stories this week, right? First of all, we had a congressman targeted for assassination by a lunatic who was just unhappy, apparently, with the way things are. We had a congressman. We had an amazing verdict out of Minnesota in regards to the Steele trial, which has returned a lot of attention to our country, and rightfully so, to be honest with you. It's an interesting word. We had Bill Cosby declared mistrial yesterday, in spite of mountains of evidence to the contrary. So we had all of that. And then we had one that I think has been absolutely shoved under the rug, but to me was really one of the biggest and it's about time moments in our country's legal history. Michelle Carter is going to go to jail, and she should go to jail. I'm sorry, she's the girl who texted with the kid who committed suicide and didn't care at all, like while he was doing it, to report it. And we have reached a point now where distance, as someone, and I'll say that in all honesty, this one is, I'm very close to this one, because just recently, within the last year and a half, I watched my son have somebody tell him online through their Xbox friendships to just go kill himself because he's useless. And when you're having a conversation with your 12-year-old son, like, no, that's not, no. And these people are so brave. When they have this distance, keyboard courage is what I call it. You can call it whatever you want, but these people are so brave. It's about time. And I know she's young, and she has a chance to turn her life around, even though she, by all cases, appears to be a sociopath. To me, it's about time. And we need to start requiring people to take responsibility. And then one out of my personal life, you guys don't know who this is, I don't think. Her name is Lorena Smith, and Lorena was a good friend of Lisa when I was in college. She killed herself Friday. She'd been battling depression for a good chunk of her life. Missionary's kid from Sri Lanka, beautiful young lady, 2 amazing kids. Husband's a professional comedian, and a good friend of ours from college as well. And she committed suicide on Friday in Sri Lanka. And her husband's a comedian, and he's funny. And she's amazing, and she knew Jesus. And she struggled with such dark depression for so long that she finally just left her family a few years ago and went back to Sri Lanka to try to rekindle some understanding of who she was. And ultimately, her depression was too much for her, and pretty huge week of just events, right? I mean, just a lot going on, heavy week, and it's just, sometimes it's real hard to, I always joke around with the kids and school and stuff. It's like every time I open Twitter, I'm like, why did I do that? Now I'm unhappy, and I'm upset, and I'm sad. But it's this, incredible, amount of information, really, the things that are going on in the country. And we started talking last week about dangerous, and I'm going to probably not spend too much time going through some of the stuff on review, but Paul's talking about, what shall we say then? Shall we go on sinning that grace can increase? Oops. By no means. We are those who have died to sin. How can we live in it any longer? And we looked at kind of, the similar times that we live in nowadays to really, some of the things that they were struggling with. Now, their struggle was coming out of religiosity, was coming out of this heavy-handed burden of religion, and they had sort of sprung forth into this sort of newfound depth of grace. But we live in this time now where Christians are kind of being shaped ultimately by their community. I mean, Christians are being shaped by what society tells you that you're allowed to be. That if you're this, you're not a decent person. That's one of my favorite words nowadays when people diss other people. It's just called being a decent human being. It's like, but who defines decency? the idea that this is what sort of defines decency. You know, that we thrive on sort of these gestures of reconciliation and stupidity. And being immediately set free from what's been your guiding parameters in life can be dangerous and destructive. Whether those guiding parameters are right or wrong, you see it all the time. When people get outside of those things that have sort of defined the rails that kept the train going in a certain direction their whole life, now suddenly those are gone, it can be dangerous. It can be destructive. And so for a lot of these Jews that sort of had this newfound faith and they were out from underneath the hand of heavy religion, all of a sudden they're like, I can do whatever and Jesus is going to forgive me? You know, and I used the example of my friend's brother, you know, who had the wheat allergy and suddenly, you know, was exposed to cake. You know, and there's no lines at that point, right? I'm going to try every kind of bread the world has to offer. And my life will be subsequently changed. And, you know, kind of looking at how it was that way for them, they've been told their entire life the law was the way of salvation. Now there's this free gift of grace. You can have all this stuff. And really you can do it with what is considered little effort comparatively to trying to be religious. And the dangerous conclusion that was being drawn is this, is that there's really nothing for God to forgive. You know, that grace really, you know, is kind of, you know, unnecessary because you really can't judge me. I don't do anything wrong. Regardless of what I do, ultimately grace is going to win, right? I mean, how many of us believe that God is going to forgive us of our sins? All of us, Jude, in this room. If you don't raise your hand, church must be awful for you. You know, the reality is that God's going to forgive us of our sins. But if He's going to anyway, for those who don't have a good understanding of why, you can see how dangerous it would be. We have people who are making decisions about fun, and really, there's no such thing as sin. And if there's no such thing as sin, there's no need for grace. Grace becomes a useless platitude in the church. And really, that's what society has tried to turn it into for the church. You can't judge, right? There's no such thing as sin. You need to forgive. God loves everybody. You should love everybody. You know, you should just walk around and hand people everything you have. That's how it should work. So we talked about dangers. And this week we're going to take a look, moving forward, at what Paul says. He says, or don't you know that all of us, so talks about sin, talks about grace, moves into this. Or don't you know that all of us who were baptized into Christ were baptized into his death? So we are baptized into Christ, and therefore our sinful nature should have passed away. So Paul kind of takes these two interesting tracks. One's metaphorical. If you would like to, if it helps to sort of think of the process of baptism in water. There's also a simple way you can look at it, that those of us who are immersed in, regardless of water, we can be immersed in Christ. So we're supposed to be a new creation, not just simply someone who puts on new clothing to look better. So the idea that as Christians is we are supposed to be a new creation, right? When we die with Christ, we pass the old person. The old person goes away. So when we die, we become immersed in his death. We become immersed in his decision to die for us. And when we make the decision to be a Christian, when we make the decision to follow Christ, it's not just simply we're sort of putting on a new facade. And we don't suddenly need to look the part. One of the things about Christians, I think a lot of times, we feel a certain burden to look the part. That we feel a certain burden to be Christian. Well, I don't know that I can tell you exactly what that is or what that's supposed to look like, because I've met some pretty crazy Christians who are just wild and weird and odd by sort of like typical societal norms. And I've also met some phenomenal Christians who are exceptionally boring, but love Jesus with their whole heart, right? So I don't know what it's supposed to look like in terms of how, but sometimes I think we take this idea of baptism as sort of being this, you know, I've heard it explained, well, baptism is this moment where you go in the old man and you come out the new. Well, that's fine as long as you actually come out new, not just washed. Okay, because Marcus has about 500 pairs of baseball pants, right? None of them look new, but all of them are washed, right? when Lisa does her best, she pours like half a gallon of bleach in there, and every now and then she'll get him looking pretty good, and then, he'll spill breakfast on him on the way to the game. Because that's what kids do. The idea that there's a difference here is, in baptism, we are supposed to emerge new. We are not supposed to emerge washed. Okay? Because washed means that we are still the old whatever without any sort of new change. And so, listen, we got to be careful that we're not just somebody look better. When we're baptized into his death, we're plunged beneath the water. So we are pushed in baptism. We all love to fall, but as a pastor, we're supposed to push, right? We're supposed to plunge you deep to the depths of the water where the Kraken lives. That would be pretty cool, though, wouldn't it? Pretty big Kraken. So we were therefore buried with him through baptism into death. Now, death, these are not fun words. These are not the kind of words we look at and go, it's just beautiful victory in Jesus. We are buried with him through baptism into death. And in order that, just as Christ was raised from the dead through the glory of the Father, we too may live a new life. So then we get pulled from the water. Right? Anybody who's ever been baptized, you get pulled from the water. Right? It's not just, okay, now when I push you down, sit up. Right? That's not how it works. There's actually a resurrection. There's a pulling from the water, that we have been raised from the dead as Christ was raised from the dead. Now, anyone who wants to draw comparisons to the Jesus post-resurrection and the Jesus pre-resurrection, there's no physical comparison. Okay? So it's did he show himself to look the part? Did he show the scars so that people would know who he was? Absolutely. But the fragility was gone. If they would have captured him again, they couldn't have crucified him the second time. Okay? So, when Christ emerged, he was a new creation, then one unbound by the power of death and sin. The fragility of his human existence was gone. He was changed. Now, Paul is not drawing a simple, minor, no big deal comparison here, right? I mean, this is a deep, heavy comparison. This is not one that grace wins every time, no big deal, just come as you are, that we stole from Nirvana. It's not like that. This is a very heavy comparison of death to resurrection. And his resurrection and power over death and sin made him even more dangerous. So Jesus in and of his own existence was obviously dangerous, right? He was running around casting out demons, healing people, watching people get saved from the church, watching the occasional person get saved from evil society, mostly from the church, because that's where most of the saving needed. And so he's running around and he's doing all these things, and he was very dangerous. He was dangerous. The Jewish establishment thought he was bad news. The Romans couldn't have cared less, but the Jews really were concerned. And he's running around, he's creating all of this turmoil because he's saying stuff, he's doing stuff that the world was not prepared to receive. The world, especially the world in which he lived. So Jesus was dangerous. But now all of a sudden his resurrection. So he goes through this change, this resurrection, and now subsequent power over death, and the removal of the fragility of the human form that was also subject to, obviously that's why he goes out and is tempted to show that he could overcome it, made it even more dangerous because up to that point, Satan believed all he had to do was kill him. The Jewish establishment believed all they had to do was kill him. They believed that there was an end point there with death. They believed that if we could just kill him, we win. Right? All we got to do is take away his life. And so the power of resurrection not only created, an awareness in his followers that death is not the end, but also showed them that he controlled the power of death. So Jesus, in coming forth, then showed Satan, you can't win. Jewish establishment, religious establishment, tyranny, you can't win. You cannot win. Because there's nothing you can do. And the Acts church, if you read the book of Acts, you see a church unbridled by the power of death and worried. They weren't worried about it. There was no concern. Jesus came out of the grave and went, hey, look, I gotta be honest, there's some good stuff on the other side. And remember all that stuff I was telling you about, how I'm gonna go make a mansion, and I'm gonna give you like good digs, and you're gonna have a great life, and and all this stuff, and I'm gonna do all this stuff for you. Remember all that? And they're like, yeah. And he's like, okay, so I was just there. Right? I mean, there's a big moment for a lot of these people who I'm sure had some, okay. And so he comes forth, and now all of a sudden this whole church is being driven by people who aren't scared to die. They're not even worried about it. And they aren't scared to live. It's like a double whammy. Because most people are either scared to live or scared to die. Right? I don't think there's a lot of people in the middle. Scared sometimes, maybe I guess. But most people are terrified by one of those two things. And we see it all the time. Scared to live, scared to die. Scared to live, scared to die. And, people who are scared to live don't take chances, they're terrified, they don't want to go outside, they don't understand what it means, they're hiding from the world overwhelms them, anxiety, heavy pressure, scared to live. People who are scared to die, right? And the same people who are running around trying to gather everything they can right now. And we're scared to live, we're scared to die, but the Acts church was not that way. Right? The Acts church, there was no worry. They're like, where are you going? No, I'm going to go over to this town. What are you going to do? Spread the gospel? Aren't you worried that, I've walked out of prison before? Right? You don't read these hymns of woe, right? There's no lamentations in the Acts church. Paul's not sitting in Rome going, I walked up, God, why have you forsaken me? Why don't you care? Why don't you smite my enemies, mighty smiter? There's none of that. Right? You read the Old Testament, right? And if you want to know where you can read some Lamentations in the Old Testament, read the book of Lamentations. It's full of a bunch of dudes going, this is awful. My life's sad. Nobody likes me. Right? How come God doesn't care? And the thing is, you don't read that stuff. The Acts church is like, man, we got no worries. We're flying around. We're too busy to worry about death and too busy to worry about life. We're going to go do this. We're going to live this life. We're going to embrace these things. We're going to get out. We're going to make a difference. I'm going to go evangelize. Well, what about your estate? Well, who's taking care of your property? Well, I sold all that. Or I don't care about that. Well, who's taking care of your business? Other people take care of it. I got to go do this. Well, what about, your 2.5 kids and your 1.5 cars? I don't know, they have that. But, what about that? And you're like, worry about that when it comes around. Not an issue right now. I got things to do. Not a problem. Well, what about all this? Not my concern. And so the book of Acts is this church flying all over the place, unbridled by the concern of death. They were the true new creation. They came out and they're like, I'm going to go live because you know what? Jesus was just there. But all you have to do to render the church impotent is make death a worry again. And what's the best way to make people care about not wanting to die? Make this life so appealing. All you got to do is throw trinkets at it. Money, cars, toys. All of a sudden it becomes about my boat and not about what Jesus wants. Got to go to work to pay for my boat. Got to go to work to pay for my house. Got to get a bigger house. Got to get a pool. Why do you got to have a pool? Because I got a pool. Why do I got to have all these things? Got to happen. My kids have to have everything in the world and have every opportunity because I have to give it to them. Because if they don't get it, then they're going to fail in life. I don't want my kids to deal with the things I dealt with, so I'm going to lavish them with goods. By the way, great idea. Lavishing your children with everything they want works out every time. It does not create little poisoned narcissists. It's true. But that's all it takes. So look around. Mightiest church in the world is located where? United States of America. What's the most impotent church in the whole world? United States of America. Why? Because we're so consumed with the money falling from heaven. And all the credit. And all the awesomeness that is toys, money, retirement, white picket fence, 3.5 kids, porn family, 3.5 kids, 2.5 cars, whatever, 6.5 dogs, whatever. But all Satan had to do to destroy the church in Acts is lavish upon the church trinkets and make it successful. Because now this life is too good, I gotta protect it. And Jesus was like, hey, lose your life, you'll keep it. We're like, hey, hang on to that life for dear death, or else you'll lose those toys. And so we have this attitude where we have become consumed with the stuff. And then the Bible says, for we have been united with him in a death like his. We will certainly also be united with him in a resurrection like his. So, read that again. For if we have been united with him in a death like his, we will be united with him in a resurrection like his. So let the reality of that sentence sink in. Right? For if we have been unified in a death like his, if we have been united, let it sink in for a second. How many of you consider your salvation transition day, whatever you want to call it, I got saved day, said yes to Jesus day, got the Spirit, whatever works for you, would say that was the day I was united with Christ in a death like this. We don't ever refer to it as a death, right? It's a life. Right? Because, you want to talk about the worst, church growth strategy in the world. Hey, come die with Jesus. Right? People are like, I'm going to go to Grace Baptist. I don't know anything about them, but Grace is in the name. Right? How many of you guys would come to a church service and come die with Jesus? Nobody. That's a horrible sales technique. Which is why Jesus was not a good salesman. Because he said, come die with me all the time. That's not a good way to do it. But Tony Robbins changes his spiel, right? There's power in death. You can overcome this life by dying. Who's with me? Right? People go, I probably shouldn't have bought your book. I gotta be honest, I'm supporting a lunatic. Right? But that's the thing, is Paul saying, listen, if you have been united, if you have been unified in a death like Jesus', that is a big, heavy reality that I think we often overlook. But also, his use of the word if here is not a qualifier of the possible. He's not saying, if you have been. Okay? It's a causation, right? If, then. Right? If you have been, in geometry it's called a conditional. If you have been united with Jesus, then you are also united in resurrection. So what he's saying is, flip it around. If you are united in his resurrection, then you are united in his death. Okay? So the question then becomes, is it a good definition of who you are? How do you define definition? Well, then you flip it back around again and you make the opposite. And you sit there and you whittle it down to realize, have I been united in his death? Have I stepped back? So I'm going back to the original point of this whole mini series in the middle of Romans is Paul says, would I ever sin so that grace can that much more abound? The answer is always no. Because I don't sin. Because I'm free from that responsibility, from that nature. Now, like I said last week, it's not about sin. Sin is sin, it happens. It's about motivation. Do I ever choose to based on motivation? His point is that if I've been through all this, then I've changed. And he says, for we know that our old self was crucified with him so that the body ruled by sin might be done away with, that we should no longer be slaves to sin, because anyone who has died has been set free. Right? How many of us have said that when we lose somebody who's been struggling with a disease for a long time, somebody who's been, basically, up and down for years, and we're like, finally, when the body finally gives out and they pass away, what do we always say? Just glad they're not feeling any pain anymore. Right? They've been set free. None of us go, Or I think you have to carry that with you. No, we realize that once the body lets go, they are free from the bonds. And that's what he's saying here, is because anyone who has died has been set free from sin. Now, if we died with Christ, then we believe that we also live with him. Right? So we see how the conditional works again. So Paul keeps going back and forth on these conditionals. Okay? And he says, listen, that we also live with him. So now we find ourselves in this, dangerous setting, right? Because we have died with Christ, we now live with him, and we should live like him. We're no longer slaves to sin, right? Nor does this earthly body and life control our decision making. This is Paul. I'm not making this part up, right? This is the part of us that says, I'm not controlled by my sinful nature anymore if I have been crucified with Jesus. If I have actually passed through to that death. Getting back to the whole point of this being dangerous, right? To the world and to the enemy, we should now be dangerous and terrifying. Because we have nothing to lose and nothing you can distract us with.
Yeah.
That's the point of Jesus' resurrection and how Paul's using that illustration for us in our salvation now. Is to the enemy, we should now be dangerous and terrifying. Because we got nothing to lose. Right? If we've truly been killed and resurrected, we can't be bought with the trinkets of sin. If we've truly been linked to Christ in death, if who we were has truly been killed, we can't be bought with trinkets. And any Christian should know that. When I watch the stupid talking heads talk about how we're supposed to defeat extremists, well, how would you defeat Christian extremism? People who are sold out to Jesus come hell or high water. Can't, right? Because you're sold out. Because you've lost, there's nothing. You're not worried about it. And man, we all know those people, right? That are just, and they're gone. And it's amazing to watch. And I don't just mean that suddenly you become crucified and you become kind of a nomad and you're sort of a random missionary to the world. There are plenty of, people who, that's extreme. But it's this sort of sold out where it's like suddenly I don't worry about the stuff I have. Especially don't worry about stuff I don't have. And you start letting go of a lot of these things that are the reason that you're scared. You start letting go of a lot of these things that are what's causing you worry. Because the Christian is meant to be the most dangerous being in the world.
Amen.
Because you're not afraid. You're not worried about it. And like I said, it's amazing to me how many times, I feel like our primary Christian worry, or our primary worry for Christians, is about the protection of our lifestyle. And when I see people say, it's amazing that God brought me through this and I was able to keep my car. And I'm like, okay, people are losing their heads right here. And like 2 posts before yours. And you're cool with the correlation. Because the reality is it's amazing how much we've been flooded with the trinkets of sin and it's really just the stacks of wealth. And it has now become what we want to protect. We're not worried about the mission. We're worried about protecting our stacks of wealth. We're worried about protecting our trinkets. But we should be capable of anything. We should be terrifying to the enemy. Because he's sitting there going, well, I had no idea you were going to, whoa, crazy. We should be terrifying. We should be people who can't be stopped. We should be distracted by nothing, singular in purpose, and prepared to be martyred for the cause. That's hard. How many of us love talking about death and martyrdom? How many of you are stoked today? You're like, it's Father's Day. This is awful. Where's good Father again? Let's get him back up there. Right? I don't want to talk about this. I want to talk about God's love for me. But this is it though, right? This is who you become. You become terrifying. Because you're not worried about it. You're not allured by it. You're resolved. You're changed. You're new. You know, and it's amazing to me, you know, how many people are so easily distracted by the allure of something the world pulls us in with that we slowly lose track of who we are as Christians. You know, I'm going to go and I'm going to have this affair because I got to be honest, it sounds really good. And it's like, but if you're a Christian, you're supposed to be dead to that nature. Why is it even alluring? Well, it's alluring because we have grown up to believe in sort of this, what's what I'm looking for, you know, in sort of this dichotomy of Christian and, you know, grabbing all the world's got to offer too. And somehow they work together, and I can grab both, right? I can grab Jesus and I can grab this world and I can have a great time. And I can have my, you know, mansion on the hill now and my mansion on the hill later. And it doesn't mean that you have to be poor. It's not the point of this. So everybody relax on your lifestyle. The idea is that it's supposed to be something where we step back and go, why am I holding on to this so tightly? And just fine letting go of this. I'll grab Jesus back when I need him later to protect this. But when I don't need him now, I'm going to grab onto this, right? And then, losing that, better grab Jesus. Give me this back, thanks Jesus. You know, and we're going back and forth. And I think that, you know, what Paul is saying is that this is kind of who we're supposed to be. Because when Jesus came out of, you know, when Jesus came out of the grave, when the stone was rolled away and he showed himself to the disciples, there was no power over death. There was no power over this life. There was no allure of this life. He had moved on, and he had bestowed, just by his presence on the people around him, that change. And that's who we're supposed to be. You know, we're not supposed to bestow upon our children and the people around us a terror of not having enough. But how many of us have said it in front of our kids? In front of our friends, I wish I had the money to, or gosh, I wish I, because I'll be honest with you, I have on more than one occasion. You know, mutter about my lack of a boat. You know, and it's like, but what am I telling my sons? That there's something lacking, right? And I have to be careful and say, no man, that's awesome. If God gives me a boat, right? I won't complain. But it's not about, it's about not lacking. And being aware of the fact that God puts us, he wants us to not be anchored to our lives. Because he proved, and by overcoming death, that he was no longer anchored to this life. He was no longer bound by this life, and he could do anything. And that's what the church is supposed to be. You know, and talking about radically loving people, radically being involved in our communities, being out there all the time, getting involved in some messy situations. Stop being dumb. Stop thinking that somehow you come to Jesus to normalize yourself. If anything, you should be aware of the fact that coming to Jesus is radicalizing yourself. You know, if you were wild before you came into the church, you should still be wild. You know, if you were boring before you came into the church, it's okay to still be boring. Nothing wrong with that. The world needs boring people. Right? But the thing is that we shouldn't be bound to, I don't want to lose my stuff. I don't want to lose my life. It should be, we've already given it away. We've already died. And it shouldn't be something that holds on to us. And in the end, do we look the part, or is there actual substance, to who we are? The point is are we just, busy trying to look scary? Sometimes I feel like in the church, we're more like, a possum to Satan, right? We're like, and he's like, wow, you sound and look really scary, but I could punch you into the backyard. I feel like a lot of times that's kind of who the church is trying to be when it comes to our faith, is that we're trying to look really scary. Like, look out, world, here we come. But it's really just a facade, right? In the back, we're like, don't call me on my bluff, don't call me on my bluff, don't call me on my bluff, don't call me on my bluff. Because Jesus, I don't want to call on my bluff, because if you call me on my bluff, and I feel like that's why I brought up Michelle Carter, and she was a Christian forever, but it's my personal view. But my thing is, we're all got kind of keyboard courage in the church, right? We all got Oswald Chambers courage, right? We open up our devotion, we're like, whatever you need from me today, Jesus. Don't call me on that Jesus, don't call me on that Jesus, don't call me on that Jesus, I gotta go get my stuff. And I think the reality is that who are we? Are we genuinely dangerous, or are we just too busy trying to look scared? Are we too busy trying to, bluff our way through it and say whatever we want from this God? Because the reality is, if there's no actual substance, then in the end we're going to be shown to be fake, right? It's Millie Vanilli. The thing is that, if you don't know who that is, Google. The whole thing is that are we actual substance as Christians? Are we substantively a new creation? Or are we just looking like, baseball pants that have been washed? Are we new? Or just kind of cleaned up? Because God doesn't need cleaned up. The mission doesn't need cleaned up. The mission needs new. And that's part of who we're called to be as Christians. And when you're new, it's amazing the things that you don't worry about. There's a lot of things that I just don't worry about anymore. And it took me time to kind of get through the wash and start realizing, I don't care how you look. It's not important to me. I know a lot of people that look fantastic. You saw that beautiful picture of Raina, right? She was dying inside for years with depression. And it's like, I don't care about that stuff. And God doesn't care about how you look. He doesn't care that you understand how to dress like a Christian, look like a Christian, and do the part. And it's coming down to, are we new creations? Because if we're genuinely a new creation, we're dangerous. If we're not a new creation, then we're just apostles. And when the real intensity comes, we play dead. So, who are we? That's a good question to ask yourself, and step back and say, which one am I? Am I really dangerous? Does the enemy even care about me? Does the enemy even know my name? Because, is there anybody, in the anti-God kingdom that even knows I'm alive? Because if not, then you're not dangerous. If not, then you're not scared. And Christians, we should be scared. So let's close in prayer. Receive offering. So, prayer of the offering, receive the offering as we close this morning. Father, we thank you so much for this morning, God. We pray your blessing over the offering. God, we thank you for Father's Day. God, I thank you for all of the fathers that I know. Tremendous men, examples, mentors, teachers, coaches, you name it. I am blessed to walk in circles with so many tremendous men that do so many great things. We live in a world that tries to tell them that every mistake they make should be registered. And God, I have seen the truth of just the powerful men that make a difference every day. And God, I thank you for them. God, I pray your blessing over the offering, and I pray, God, a tremendous day of celebration and time with our families as we continue to honor you in all that we do, being Christ-like and godly examples. Amen.